here we go. This is RYEbenCB for Raise Your Edge, and in this first video course I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about perfect open raise strategies. So I would say let's crack right into it. I remember one day doing content with a buddy and we were doing some post-flop analysis, and in these days, a couple years ago, we didn't have any kind of solver tools like PO solver or simple post flop. So we basically just used our brains and a pencil and a paper. And by analyzing our post flop leaks, most of the time they were caused by poor pre-flop ranges. And a lot of mistakes, speaking about post flop mistakes, gotten fixed by or due playing the right pre-flop ranges. And my non-showdown winnings or my non-showdown graph went ridiculously up within the next weeks. So having good pre-flop ranges is basically the fundamentals you need in order to be a very successful tournament player in these days, especially because people are getting more aware of odds and outs and they're defending lighter. So if you're still having fucked up ranges and you're to lose, you're gonna lose a lot of money. So in that course, first I'm gonna start giving you an overview about the typical mistakes people do in these days, so you can go on and exploit these mistakes. I will give you some principles of correct open raising. We show you factors that impact our range. We're also gonna construct ranges there for post ante. I'm gonna give you adjustments for stack sizes between 25 and 40 big blinds, as well as for 10 to 25 big blinds. And not in this video, but in the next videos, in the second part of this video, I'm gonna show you real hand examples. So every single video is divided into two videos. The first video is where I show you the theory, I show you principles, I show you strategies, and basically that the concepts that stand behind the hands that I'm going to show you in the second video. And as already mentioned, in the second video we're going to do real hands, and I highly recommend always watching the first video, because otherwise you might not really understand why I do certain things, and I'm not gonna fully repeat all the theories in the practical part. So what can you expect here from that video? You can expect guidelines to open raise properly. I will give you exact ranges you can use right away. I'm gonna upload them, you can download them, you can print them out, and you can play with them. Yet I don't really recommend that, because just copying things, it might work here and there, but in order to understand things and in order to implement things, you should rather do it for yourself. You should create the ranges with the help of my instructions, with the help of my guidelines and advices, and then you can compare them to my ranges and then make amendments and fix them if you need to. Also, by following my instructions and guidelines, you're going to be able to handle tricky post-flop spots, or rather you're going to avoid them, and you'll be able to make proper decisions every single time. And you can also expect for the second part of the video, or for the second video, a lot of explanation based on real hands. So let's crack into it, and I show you some typical mistakes people do in these days. Their ranges are too static. This is basically just playing their ranges no matter how the table looks like, no matter how the table lineup is, no matter what kind of players are sitting behind. They're just raising their ranges and they're not really adapting based on the lineup. They're not really considering nowadays population tendencies. People in these days, they're defending wider, They're more pot odds aware, and all those YouTube videos people teach things about pot odds, about how to defend properly. So especially from the big blind, people know, okay, I can defend fairly wide. You have probably already experienced that that your enemy, or not your enemy but villain, is defending their blind or the button or the cutoff way wider than, for example, 2 or 3 years ago. And apparently we have to adapt based on that. 3 years ago, you already made a lot of money by just open raising fairly loose, but this is not really working out today anymore. Very poor in-game selection, and this is basically the most crucial mistake. What people are not understanding is that money comes from the fish. So if you're not playing enough hands against the fish, or you're not adapting properly, you're not gonna increase your win rate. All those crushers, if you look them up and if you observe their game, you will see that they, first of all, they have very rock solid preflop ranges. You can hardly exploit them, but they're still able to exploit their opponents. But you cannot really see that in their stats, because in the long run, on average, they have very balanced ranges, but they're able to jump from 70% button open raising range to 40%. And in the long run, they have around 50%, which is pretty good, right? So you cannot see that. But they know, okay, there's a fish in the blinds, I have to play looser. Or there's a fish on the button and the cutoff, I have to raise tighter from middle position or hijack. Or if there are two tightish racks on the button or on the cutoff, I can raise looser. That's basically how you should adjust. How you should adjust based on your opponents who are sitting behind. Open raising to lose from early and middle position is something I see all day long, again and again. You will see later that my ranges, especially from early position, they're pretty tight. You shouldn't go any tighter, but there's not so much money to win from early position anyway. Especially on lower stakes and mid stakes, where you have more recreational players sitting behind. You're gonna flat call a ton, and they're really sticky. You don't want to be too loose, or you don't want to be the guy who's just folding a ton or raising a ton, and then your range on the flop is way too wide and you cannot really continue. Yeah, in general, people underestimate the power of solid preflop ranges, and they're overplaying a shit ton of offsuited ace x crap hands from late positions. They're open raising any offsuited ace from hijack, which is total garbage. And you probably heard about it, GTO. And this is pretty dangerous. I will also come to or speak about GTO more in the post-flop section, because GTO applies more post-flop, or it's more important for post-flop, but it also applies for pre-flop. But here I want to especially talk about board coverage. And this is really dangerous. You want to have board coverage against players you're playing again and again. Because if someone figures out that in certain situations you're not really having that many nutted hands, because, for example, if you're just raising Broadway heavy hands and high pocket pair hands, you're not going to have many nutted hands on low board, something like 6-5-4 or 7-8-9 or 3-4-5. You're not going to have straights. You're rarely going to have sets. So that's what I mean by board coverage. But nobody is just exploiting that on lower mid stakes. So GTO basically means that the single hand might not be very profitable as an open raise, but for our entire range, it makes a lot of sense to open raise that hand, so that in case a board like 4-5-6 or 6-4-3 or deuce 3-4 is showing up, that we also have straights, sets in our range, so our opponent cannot exploit us and bluff it ton and also go very thin for value. But again, nobody in low stakes or mid stakes and even high stakes is playing enough hands against you so that he can figure that out. So you don't really need to be afraid that someone is going to exploit you. This is just bullshit. So we basically want to open raise those hands that are profitable, the hand itself, and not think about our entire range. So here I'm going to give you a few principles you can apply in order to open raise the correct ranges and entities, and also being able to make adjustments. But let me say something first. It's not about knowing the right thresholds or the exact thresholds and like, okay, if this guy has a VPIP of 28, I have to do this and this. No, if you have the rough thresholds and you be able to make proper adjustments, even though they might not be 100% perfect, you gain already a huge edge over the field. So don't confuse yourself, don't overwhelm yourself that you have to be 100% right in every single spot. No, it's about knowing the tendencies and then making proper adjustments. So from early position, we can hardly make adjustments because there are just too many players sitting behind. If we open raise from under the gun or under the gun +1 or 2, there are 6 to 8 players sitting behind. So there are just too many players involved that can have impact on our range. I mean, it must be a very soft lineup where we can be tremendously loose. Our range is pretty tight anyway, so we shouldn't go any tighter. So the only question is, can we go looser? And that is especially the case when there are 2 big fish sitting in the blinds. From middle position, we can start making little adjustments based on the button or also based on cutoff and the blinds. So here, if the button and the cutoff, the button is always the most important position. He can bring us in very dicey situations when we are not open raise properly pre-flop. So always take a look at the button and then to the blinds, especially button, big blind, small blind. That's basically the order you have to follow. And if the button is tight, we open raise looser. If the cutoff is also tight, we can go even looser. And if there are 2 fish in the blinds or 1 fish, we can go even looser again. So if the lineup is something like tight reg on the button, tight reg in the cutoff, 1 fish in the blinds, boom. Instead of just raising 32% from the cutoff, I would open raise 40 to 50% from the cutoff. If I'm the hijack and my range would be 30%, usually I would open raise 40 to 45% just because of the lineup is so soft. Late position, here we make tremendous adjustments. That's basically when we're in the cutoff, when we're in the button and blinds are tight or very weak. We can increase our ranges by 10, 20, 30% easily. So let's say we open raise 45 to 50% from the button and the big blind is a super nit and the small blind is whoever, a reasonable player. We should open raise around 60 to 70%. Same for the cutoff. If the button is tight, there's 1 fish in the blinds. Instead of raising 30%, we should open raise 40, 45%. But we should also go a little bit tighter if the lineup is very nasty. So if there's a sticky player in the button and there are very aggressive players in the blind or very good regulars where we hardly win any money, or let's say we are not really having an edge on them, we shouldn't go any loser. The ranges I will give you, especially for early position, middle position, you shouldn't go any tighter than that. They're already pretty rock solid, and if someone is bluffing a lot or very aggressive, he's automatically losing money. So bear that in mind. If the aggressive player is sitting behind, just stick to the ranges. They're gonna lose automatically money. So you don't need to adjust at all against aggressive opponents. That's the good thing about it. It's about a quick gathering of information. You don't want to look around for 5, 6, 7, 10 seconds and then open a pop-up, hover over your HUD, scramble around. No, you want to take a look at VPIP for 3-bet and then make a quick decision. Or maybe if you already have a little bit more experience, you have been playing against certain opponents already, and you have certain reads what kind of hands they're defending pre-flop, you want to use them, and then you make a decision. Or also, if you know, and that is a little bit more deeper, a little bit more advanced, if there's an opponent where you know about his post-flop game and you can take advantage of that, then you can also go loser. A rough threshold here. If someone is playing around 24, 27, that means he's 3-betting 7% overall. He is raising, or his pre-flop raise is 20%, and his VPIP is 24. That's pretty reasonable. It's more on the tighter side though. And if he's tighter than that, he's apparently a tighter opponent, and you can start making adjustments. So if I see that someone is playing 22-18 on the button, he's not playing as many hands as he should yet. That means that he's probably not defending his button wide enough. That means I'm gonna go wider from the cutoff. Why not? I don't give a fuck about GTO, what I'm supposed to open raise there. The same for the big blind. If someone is playing 20-18 or 21-16 and 3-bet of 5%, he's never defending his big blind as he's supposed to defend. So why should I stick to my range? I go wider than that. I'm gonna print a lot of money just by open raising loose. But here, on a side note, very important, if someone is tight and he's defending, keep in mind his post flop or his range he's coming to the flop with is stronger. So don't burn the money by over c-betting or by getting too fancy post flop, because remember, you're exploiting him pre-flop, not post-flop. So if he's defending, keep that in mind. I mean, you don't have to turn into a total nit, but if you have any kind of borderline c-bets, bear that in mind, connect the dots, think about pre-flop. Okay, this guy is tight, so I should take that into account as well. Hence, I should probably not c-bet that hand because he has less queen high, jack high hands or whatever, which I'm trying to attack and fold out. Same applies for the turn. If the guy called you on the flop, his range is probably stronger on average. Next point, which factors impact our range? First of all, very important, in-game table awareness. You're not going to be able to adjust and play properly and open raise properly if you have no awareness at all. If you're just sitting there, you're 20 tabling and you're watching a series next on your second screen, you're not going to be able to internalize it and apply those things. So it's always about this player sitting behind, and the reason why I'm repeating that over and over again is because people are just underestimating it. They're just underestimating it. It's annoying working on pre-flop ranges, but this is the fundamental. This is what you need. Otherwise, you're gonna make so many post-flop mistakes that are so easy to get rid of. So very easy here. If there's a loose aggressive player behind, we're gonna be tighter. For shorter stack size, and I will come to that later, we also start limping a few hands. But keep in mind, the ranges I have designed for you, they're already more on the tighter side, especially from early position and middle position. So you don't really need to adjust there. If you have tight players, you go looser. And if you have loose, but they are very passive, so they are those typical 50-20 players. And if I use the number 50-20, I always mean, or if I just say two random numbers, 50-20, 40-20, 22-20, I always mean VPIP and PFR. That means how many hands they basically play pre-flop. So if you have a guy playing around 50-20, you want to open raise tighter and a playable range if the guy has position on you. Yet if the guy is sitting in the blinds and you have position on him, you shouldn't be that tight anyway, because he seems to be a huge whale and we're going to make a lot of money against him post flop. But I will also show you that on the ranges I have constructed. And also we're gonna take a more deeper look into how exactly to adapt based on the real hands, which we will do in the second video. Because you might ask yourself right now, yeah Ben, but what does it mean, be tighter, be looser? No, remember, in this video we just talk about the concepts. Here another few factors that impact our range. Again, players in the blinds, if they're fish, we're gonna be looser. If they're tight or weak racks, we also open raise looser. If they're aggressive racks, we should be a little bit more tighter and maybe open raise blocker range. But this is more important also for shorter stack sizes, so that we block their rejamming range. So we don't want to raise a hand like pocket fours from middle position into the blinds who are fairly aggressive, or we don't want to raise from the hijack a hand as weak as pocket threes with 20 big blinds against aggressive racks in the blinds. And remember, early position, middle positions, the ranges are pretty tight anyway, so you don't really need to adjust there. It's only from button cutoff and hijack, because there it's the ranges I have designed, they're more on the looser side. Here you need to adjust a bit, but also how you should adjust, I'm going to show you that as well. If you have no information at all and they're all unknowns, it's very likely that they are recreational players. Then just stick to your standard game plan here, quote unquote GTO. That means the ranges I gave you or I constructed for you, they are basically close to GTO. So people can hardly exploit you. I have apparently considered population tendencies, so that we should open raise a bit looser from the button, because people are not 3-betting as much as they should from the small blind. Hence we realize more equity from the button. We see more flops, we're going to play more in position. The same for the cutoff and the same for the small blind. But other than that, the ranges are pretty tight anyway, and nobody will be able to exploit you. So if you have that thought of, oh, this idiot sitting behind me and he's 3-betting me and he's exploiting me. No, he was just lucky that you just had bad hands. If you just stick to ranges and you're not going crazy, nobody will be able to exploit you unless you're not making any crazy folds pre-flop against 3-bets. But how to play against 3-bets, that will be part of a different video. Now I will show you the ranges I have constructed for you. They're basic ranges. You should always try to adapt to the table lineup as best as possible. The transitions are floating, so don't take the thresholds too seriously. Again, you should make adjustments at certain stack sizes and based on the table lineup. So for example, from the small blind, you should play between 45 and 90%. If they're unknowns or fish who are basically playing super tight, you should open raise any two from the small blind. There's no meta game. You're not going to play 100 or 1,000 of hands against him. You will not find out that you're exploiting him. I mean, you should not open raise 5 orbits in a row against him, but the thing is that you're going to be first in from the small blind 3 or 4 times in a row. This is very unlikely. From the button, same should be here. If there are 2 big fish or 2 tight players in the blinds, why not open raising 90% of your hands? So be very flexible and always adapt. From another gun, you should definitely open raise somewhere between 10 and 15%. We start with 40 big blinds and deeper. And from another gun, you see 11%. It's pretty tight. You should never go tighter than that unless we have some ICM considerations at the final table. But if you have more than 40 big blinds on the final table, you're one of the big stacks and you should open raise looser anyway. Don't get confused. It says 100 big blinds under the gun. This 100 big blind, it stands for early game, big stack. So this range is for 40 big blinds and more. So if we have that situation that the table lineup is pretty soft, the players sitting behind are not that aggressive, then we can also open raise it for a few more suited aces, a few more pocket pairs, especially when the blinds are very weak. You can also limp them. You can also limp a hand like ace-7 suited, pocket 5s, pocket 6s. That's no problem at all. So we should play somewhere between 11 and 14 to 15% here from under the gun. Under the gun +1, our standard range should always at least 12%. So here from under the gun, this is at least. You should not raise tighter than that. From under the gun +1, we should raise at least 12%. We're gonna open raise a few more suited aces. Here again, table is soft, blinds are fishy / weak, button is tight. We can also open raise any suited ace, any pocket pair, and also start raising a hand like king, queen off. From under the gun +2, our range should be at least 14%. Now we start open raise a hand like king, queen off, pocket 5s, also 8-7 suited. And if, again, table is soft, good lineup, and now you know what it means, a good lineup, so I don't need to explain it anymore. We can also open raise a hand like ace-10 off, or the suited aces, or maybe something like king-9, 7-6 suited. From MP, we should always open raise at least, or you can also say under the gun +3, but here I use the term middle position, at least 17%. We should open any suited ace, we should open king-jack off, we should open ace-10 off, we should open any pair, 7-6 suited as well. And again, if table is good, we add those hands like jack-9, queen-9, king-9 suited, 10-8, 9-7 suited, queen-jack off, king-10 off. If, for example, the players are very passive, so they're playing something like 50-20, 40-20, and remember what I've told you earlier, what those numbers mean. I'm not gonna repeat it. So if the VPP for RYEben is fairly high, and that means they're more on the passive side, but they want to play a lot of hands, we want to limp those hands. We want to limp a hand like king-9 suited, queen, just have to go back. Here we go. Like king-9 suited, queen-9 suited, jack-9 suited, queen-jack off. We can also limp those because we have not that much forward equity, because they're going to call us very often. But since they're pretty weak, even though they have position on us, but since they're recreational players and weak, and they're going to make a lot of mistakes, we want to play those hands against them. And if there's a lot of action behind, so someone is raising or 3-betting, we can let go of those hands. As easy as that. Hijack. We should always raise at least 25% here. We open any Broadway hand, also hands like king-8 suited. It's also totally reasonable opening a hand like 9-7 suited here. Again, this is the range we should always open raise at least. If someone is open raising king-7 suited, is a standard open raise, it's not horrible. Again, the transitions are basically floating, and if cutoff and button are tied, you can open raise any ace here, right? Or hands like 10-7 suited, king-5 suited, and you can go up to 30-32%. From the cutoff, we should open raise, and this is now more on the loser side already. If the button is sticky, if the blinds are good and there's not so much money to win anyway, I would fold a few more of suited aces. I would fold a hand like 5-4 suited, and I would probably raise around 29-30%. Here I go a little bit tighter, but you shouldn't go tighter than 30% unless they're super maniac, but this is rarely the case. And if button is tight, if we have those dream setup of button is tight and there's at least one weak player in the blinds, we should open raise around 40%. That means any suited king, 6-4, 9-6, queen-6, queen-5 suited, any ace, king-9, queen-9, jack-9, 10-9 off, 6-4 suited, those kind of hands. And then we open raise around 37-40%. From the button, you see our range is pretty suited heavy and not that many off-suited kings. They don't have that much value anyway, but again, if black players are tight, are not that aggressive, or they're also weak, we can go up to 80%, no problem at all. If I see the big blind is playing something like 18-11, I'm not folding a hand like 10-6 off. I'm not folding a hand like 7-6 off. But if there's one decent regular and an unknown, I stick to my 50% range here, or even 45%. If someone just wants to open 45%, that's totally fine. Here again, remember, the late positions are a little bit looser than the average player is open raising from these positions. the small blind. Here we are open raising 46%. Remember, we are out of position, and this is a raise only strategy. Here I also implemented how to react against 3-bets. But how to play against 3-bets, this will be also part of another video. But here I want to show it you for the small blind already. So I implemented the 4-bet bluffing range, our 4-bet for value, our fold versus 3-bet range, and our call versus 3-bet range. It's questionable if you want to 4-bet a hand like ace queen. You can also just call against the 3-bet, but then you should 4-bet bluff a little bit less, otherwise you are over bluffing. The thing is though that people usually, that's why we are slightly over folding against 3-bets a bit with 54%, because people usually 3-bet not that much from the big blind. I mean, they're in position and they're getting a good price, and people are not raising or 3-betting that much from the big blind. We should always open raise 3 times the big blind. If we have more than 40 big blinds from, we should more than 3 times the big blind from the small blind. Tricky words. So, for example, it's totally reasonable to call any pair against a 3-bet. It's also totally reasonable to not 4-bet the king 8 suited, queen 8 suited, jack 8, 9 7 suited, just fold them. I don't mind that. But if you play against a reasonable opponent who is capable of 3-betting also pretty light, or let's say in frequencies where it's pretty well balanced between value hands and bluff hands, we also want to be well balanced. We don't want to overfold. We want to continue with proper ranges. And why do we 4-bet those hands? First of all, we want to choose those hands that are fairly close as a defend. King 8 suited, queen 8, jack 8 suited, calling against a 3-bet might be a little bit too loose, but they might also be a bit too weak for folding. So we choose those hands. I mean, king 10 suited would be a waste of equity if we would 4-bet fold it, right? It's strong enough to call against a 3-bet. So all those hands that are strong enough to call a 3-bet, they play pretty good post flop. They have enough equity. We call those. And then we choose those hands that, first of all, they have the most equity against the calling range. So if our opponent, he 3-bets us and he calls our 4-bet, we want to have those hands in our range that have the most equity. And those are these kinds of hands that are marked as red. We don't want to 4-bet the bottom of our range, hands like jack 3 suited or 7 4 5 suited or queen 9 off, because those are just too weak. So if you're not 4-betting jacks, ace queen off and ace queen suited, you should also not 4-bet bluff that much, because otherwise you might over bluffing. Yet, I mean, same procedure here as well. If someone is 3-betting a lot and you have the stat and you have the read on him that he's very aggressive, and you have here for position 3-bet position hands. So if you have the stat that he's 3-betting a lot from the big blind, and you want to have at least more than 300 hands to have a valid number, you can 4-bet bluff ton. You can take that into account that he's just basically over bluffing from the big blind. Then your bluffing frequencies can also get a little bit out of line. That's no problem at all. But for that, as long as you don't have that read, don't do it. Stick to ranges and you'll be fine. So the thing is, I also gonna show you a mixed strategy. So hands where we, or a range where we open raise hands, we limp hands, and I'm gonna show you what hands to limp 3-bet with, what hands to limp fold, limp call, yada yada yada. So the question is, which strategy do we execute? If our opponent is more on the tighter side, he's not so sticky, we want to play in an open raise only strategy, right? And then we can also go a little bit looser than those 46%. It's no problem at all. If the guy is super tight, you should open raise 60, 70, 80% anyway. But if your opponent is very sticky and he's pretty good, I rather want to play a mixed strategy, because otherwise I cannot really raise that many hands from the small blind anyway. He's good. He's floating me in the right frequencies. He's bluffing a lot. I'm gonna realize my equity less. So I'm start playing a mixed strategy where I limp a few hands and I'm also raising hands. And here, this might look a little bit overwhelming. Just take your time, look at it. I have everything explained on the right side. The orange hands are those hands we limp calling with. The pink hands are those hands we limp 3-betting with. And the green, what is it, blue-green, hands like 10-6 here are all limp forward hands. And the brown ones are all limp 3-bet bluff hands with. And the yellow ones we are open raise calling against the 3-bet. It has one disadvantage. As you can see, we don't have a 4-bet range. That's because aces and kings is in our limping range, right? So since aces and kings, which is the biggest fraction of our 4-betting range, and ace king suited, when we open raise, we don't 4-bet bluff and we don't 4-bet for value, as easy as that. Because now, since we start limping, we also have to put a lot of stronger hands in our limping range. And if we start spreading our hands over like open raise 4-betting, open raise call, limp 3-betting, our ranges are just getting too spreaded, and that's very, very hard to execute and very, very hard to apply. That's why we just keep it simple here, and we are not 4-betting at all, which is totally fine. We put our very strong hands in our limp 3-betting range. And if you take a look at the frequencies, you can also see that our opponent, he cannot really exploit us. No matter what we're doing, we have the right frequencies to continue. If he's raising too much against our limp, we have enough hands, strong enough hands we can continue with. If he wants to attack our open raise, we have also enough hands we can continue with. Again, if you make adjustments here and you say, okay, no, I want to put queen 10 off and jack 10 off in my limp calling range and rather open raise king jack, king queen off, yeah, that's okay. The reason why I put king queen, king jack off in my limp call range here is that I also want to have some stronger broad raise in my limp calling range. If I would also open raise them, you would see that basically my limp call range is my open raise call versus 3 range is very Broadway heavy, and my limp call range has barely any broadways. Guys, and don't forget the raise size. For your opponent, this is basically against the 3x big blind raise. If your opponent is 2.5xing, we have to defend more. I would call 10-8 off against the raise. I would call 8-7 off against the raise. I would call also 9-5, 10-6 suited, 7-6 off. Right, so I would call more hands. If our opponent is 3.5xing or 4xing the big blind, I would also start folding. I would, for example, fold jack deuce to jack 5, jack 6 suited, the weakest suited queens. Jack 8, queen 8 off. And then because our opponent is raising bigger, he's giving himself a worse price for his bluff. So we automatically have to defend less. So our adjustments for 25 to 40 big blinds. Don't overplay suited connectors and low pocket pairs pre-flop. I mean, we're getting shorter. Suited connectors and low pocket pairs lose value. They're very strong with deeper stack sizes. So the shorter we get, the less value we have with those hands. Make stack size analysis. What does it mean? If you have plenty of rejam stacks sitting behind, you want to become tighter. You have to become tighter anyway, because if someone 3-bets against you, you cannot probably bluff anymore most of the time. So you often have to play all in or forward, and when calling, the stack to pot ratio is going to be so shallow that you hardly realize your equity. So, you're gonna, let's say it this way, you're gonna realize less equity. If you open raise from the hijack, you should now raise around 23% from the cut of 27 and from the button 45%. Again, especially when we're talking about 25, 30 big blinds, people can just rejam the shit out of you if you are open raising too much. But this will be part of the resteal video where we will talk, or where I will teach you everything you need to know about rejamming, how to react against rejams, yada yada yada. And we should start playing a mixed strategy from the small blind anyway, especially with 25, 55 big blinds, and that also applies for the stack size 10 to 25 big blinds. We don't want to raise forward hands like 9-8 suited and stuff. We have to protect our equity, especially 25 big blinds and less is a protection game. So how does our adjustments look like for 20 to 25 big blinds? First of all the ranges I'm going to show you will be uploaded, so you don't need to make notes regarding those ranges you want to, or the hands you have to open raise with, so you can use them right away. So I'm gonna show you them real quick here. I'm gonna again make them ready to go for you. This is our under the gun range here. Under the gun +1, under the gun +2, MP, hijack, cutoff, and button. So this is for 25 big blinds, and you can see now our range is getting even tighter. That's because otherwise opponents can just rejam a ton against us. So MP even 15%, but that is totally reasonable. And cutoff 26%, button 41%, which is still a little bit more on the looser side. And from the small blind here, we have a mixed strategy. So you can see here, we're still playing 68%. And this is the big advantage of playing a mixed strategy. Since we're limping, we can play more hands because we invest less money. And every single time you invest less money pre-flop, you will work with small open raise sizes, or you're limping, you can play automatically more hands. So you can see those hands we're open raise folding with. By the way, I just see that I would put this low suited hands here in my either limp calling or limp pushing. You can also limp push a few. I would not open raise fold them. So I'm gonna adjust that right away. So something like this. Oh, that was the wrong color. And you can also limp push here the off-suited aces, which is totally reasonable. Depends really on your opponent. If you're playing against someone who's playing 18-11, you should open raise anyway. But if it's more on the tighter side, I would not bluff that much. Tighter means if it's 3-bet stat, less than overall 88%. That is pretty tight. If it's more than 10%, I mean, I'm speaking about the 3-bet percentage, but you can, how much he's 3-betting is often a good indicator also how much he's raising with a small bet. Obviously, having the big blind, this is really important here, the raise big blind versus small blind limp is pretty crucial here. If that is more than 35%, you can limp jam those hands. If it's less than, you should become more tighter. And as you can see, the brown hands here, Queen 7, Queen 6, Queen 5 suited, those are the more or less low equity hands. We don't want to, not low equity hands, but compared, for example, to Jack 10, 10, 9 suited. Those hands are so good, we don't want to raise for them. That's what I mean by protecting our equity. And then hands like 6, 5 suited, we can easily limp fold them, depending on the sizing though. If he's opening, if he, for example, is raising too much against small blinds, a hand like 6, 5, 4, 5 suited is a perfect candidate to go for a 4-bet jam. Really, really good. You don't want to 4-bet jam hands like King 5 off or King 8 off. You want to take those suited aces or the pocket pairs, which are pretty good here, or suited connectors. The red hands are those we are raise calling with. I mean, a hand like Ace 9 suited or Ace 10 off, you can also raise call, totally reasonable, or Ace 8 suited, and then you're good to go. As you can see here, you can still make adjustments here and there, but this is basically just a basic chart, and you can work with that. You can make adjustments also based on your opponent, based on your own style, but this will give you a rough idea how you can approach the small blind against a really good opponent. Again, if you're playing against the fish, okay, now I'm gonna destroy the own chart, but for example, if you're playing against the fish, I'm just gonna show you it real quick. I would just here limp my shit hands, the low equity hands, And then I would raise, and I'm gonna make that in with the blue color here, I would raise my strong hands. I would have a super unbalanced limping and raising range, because a fish, he's not taking advantage of it. He's not that aggressive as a regular. So I mean, this is a little bit not accurate. Obviously, I just want to show you the principle here. This is how I would approach my game against a recreational player. Something like this. Yeah. My hands that are having the most equity, I'm just raising. And as you can see, my limping range and my raising range is super unbalanced. But against a recreational player, you want to play very, very exploitative. So what adjustments are we doing for 10 to 25 big blinds? The mixed strategy I just showed you, as you could see, since we're limp jamming, this is the small blind range for 10 to 25 big blinds. The range we are playing between 25 and 40 big blinds, what we're open raising from those position, again, are pretty much or almost the same as we open raising with 40 big blinds and more. But remember here, I gave you the numbers from the hijack cutoff and button. You should become a little bit tighter, and then you're good to go. From under the gun and middle position, we're already raising pretty tight, so you don't need to adjust there. So for 10 to 25 big blinds, we start open shoving more, especially with 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 big blinds. What kind of hands? I'm going to show you in the video where we will cover when to jam, how to jam, what hands to jam, what to consider, yada, yada, yada. We open raise tighter from the button, cutoff, and hijack. I already showed you that. You're going to have the ranges. You can see it right away. I will show you that based on real hand examples as well. We start limping more hands, especially from the small blind, but also you can start limping from the cutoff and button. I'm going to cover that on real hands as well. The more reshove stacks are sitting behind, the lower your raise fold gap has to become. So I'm not going more into depth here because this is more part of the rejam course or re-stealing course, but just to give you the basic principle here, the raise fold gap means how many hands are we open raising and how many hands are we calling off. And if you're just raise folding too much in a too high frequency, you're gonna lose a lot of money. Very important here, if the bigger stack is in the big blind and the small blind is a smaller stack, the reshove likelihood is higher. Why? A smaller stack on the small blind, he's rejamming hands like Queen Jack, Jack 10 suited, 10-8 suited, a suited ace, or something like Jack 9 suited, or King Jack, King 10, King 9 suited. Those hands with 15, 20 big blinds, those are pretty reasonable to rejam with. He's rejamming all those hands from the small blind, yet if he's sitting in the big blind though, he might call those hands, so he's probably just calling them and play a flop. But since he's in the small blind, he has one player left to act, he's rejamming those hands. So if the positions are swapped, then the reshove likelihood is decreasing a little bit. That means our equity realization from the button is a little bit higher. So bear that in mind. The bigger stack is in the big blind. The smaller stack, I'm speaking about 10 to 25 big blinds, then you should open raise a bit tighter from the button. So instead of around 45, I would raise only 40%. So if you don't know how a 40% range look like every single time in these courses, if you don't know, okay, what is a 40% range, just pause it, take a look at it and make a note or whatever, right? You want to implement it right away in your game and not just observe. You don't want to be a passive listener. You want to be active. You want to take action and you want to implement the stuff in your game. You want to see results, and results are not coming just because you're watching the theory, and then you jerk off to the theory or whatever, right? So no, you're not going to become a better poker player if you just watch it and you listen to it and you understand the theory and like, yeah, now I understand everything. No, you want to see the theory, you want to take notes, you want to see, okay, what do I have to implement in my game? What do I have to work on? Then you have to take action. That's important. Execution beats the theory, as easy as that. So if we open from the cutoff and there are reshove stacks at the button and the small blind, we have to open tighter. Also, I'm speaking about the effective stack size here. So if you have 50 big blinds, but you have 124 big blind stack in the cutoff, you have a 20 big blind stack in the small blind, you have 15 stack in the big blind. Then we are talking about here the adjustments for 10 to 25 big blinds. So it's always about the effective stack size, not only your own stack size. So we come to an end here of this theory part. There will be a second video, as you know. Solid preflop ranges are the very fundamentals. Flexible ranges, especially from hijack, cutoff, button, small blind. At first sight, it seems to be very, very easy and simple, and also very annoying. I know preflop, because you're not seeing the results based on the preflop ranges. You're gonna play big pots on the river, right? And that's where you think the money comes from, winning the big pots on turns and rivers and showdowns. No, but preflop is where basically the beginning of the chain of mistakes. That's where the biggest mistakes come from, or starts. So bad preflop ranges lead to many nasty post-flop spots. You're often dominated, you're losing on showdown winnings, you're gonna be in many tough situations. So, and especially for unexperienced and players or multi-tabling grinders. So if you're one of those guys who they're grinding a lot, multiple tables, you should have very solid preflop ranges anyway, so that you can focus on multi-tabling, which is, I'm not blaming it, right? It's at the end, it's about increasing your hourly. If you have a return of investment of 20, 30, 40%, or let's say 20, 30%, and you're playing 20 tables, yeah, that's good. I mean, you're probably gonna have the same hourly as someone who only has, quote unquote, only 50, 60% ROI, but he's only playing 10 tables, right? So it's all about the hourly. But if you're one of those multi-tabling grinders, bear in mind, you especially then you want to have very rock solid preflop ranges. With rock solid, I don't mean super nitty, no, but they have to be solid. And little surprise here, guys, this is your call to action. Remember, you're not only here to watch the course and be an observer. You want to get the results. You can only do that if you're gonna take action. So here we go. Here's your call to action. I want you to create your own ranges. You saw them right now, so you might have an idea, but I want you to take an Equilab tool, and then you go from under the gun to small blind. Why doing it again? You have to learn them anyway. So you have to spend time on recognize them, learning them, and internalizing them. So you have to do that anyway. You cannot print out 10 to 20 ranges and take a look on them while playing. No, you don't want to waste your time during playing. So it needs a certain amount of time in order to implement them. So the fastest way to do that is if you create those ranges for yourself, right? You're gonna do mistakes, but if you're doing a lot of mistakes, then you know, oh fuck, yeah, good that I watched this course and I can work on that. But if you were right and you didn't do that many mistakes, you automatically have learned them, right? If you do that once, you're creating them, you're readjusting here and there, you're tweaking them a little bit. That's the best way to learn things, and then you're good to go. You can use them right away, and you don't need to waste time to print them out and to hang them over your screen or wherever in order to be able to work with them while playing. Do that at least once for under the gun to small blind, for 40 big blinds and more. Then you do it for the position. You remember for hijack, cutoff, button, small blind for 25 to 40 big blinds. And then you do it also once for 10 to 25 big blinds from under the gun to small blind, by considering my principles, my strategies, which I have taught you. And then you compare them with my ranges, right? And then you will see, okay, what did I wrong? Where do I have to need, or where do I need to work on, and what do I have to do better in order to to fix my preflop leaks. Just make a summary of what you have learned here, and this is really important because it is scientifically proven that everything we write down, we will be able to memorize way better and way longer. So if you're not making any notes, it's very likely in 1 week you will forget everything again. And this is not what I want. I want you guys to take the most out of it and crush the games. So I know this is work, but again, it's about execution, it's about doing, it's about taking action. And it's not that much. It's not so much you have to do here. Just making a summary, 3-4 points, crucial points. It can be short, it has to be on point. Don't write a fucking wall of text in 2-3 weeks or in 6 months. If you take a look back and you look at it right away, you want like, okay, those were the points I have been working on, those were my sticking points. I always recommend do 2 or 3 points, the main points of the video, then also points where you realize, okay, those are my leaks, those are my sticking points, and then the points you want to work on and how you want to work them. And all in all, they're like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points. It's not that much. It takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes. You should not sit down and write a fucking book. Your goal for the next 4 sessions, in-game awareness. How can you do that? You can, as easy as that, you write down your goal for that session. Okay, my goal for this session is I want to be very aware when I open race preflop. You can set a timer. You can set your timer for 10 minutes. There you avoid getting into that unconscious mode of just, you know, grinding and playing a B or C game. And every single time the alarm clock rings, you're like, reminder, awareness reminder. And you immediately know, okay, yes, I have to be more aware in game when I open raise hands. I should take a look at the button. I should take a look at the blinds. And at some point you will automate that process, and you're going to be able to not even waste your energy. In this very moment, it costs you a bit of energy because you have to remind yourself, you have to be aware. But at some point it turns into your unconscious competence, and you're going to be able to do that right away. It's like open raising aces, right? You're also not thinking about, hey, I have aces. It's the best starting hand in poker. I think it's a profitable player, open raise. No, you know it's good. The same is with every single sticking point. You need to train your awareness, and then you, at some point, it turns into your unconscious competence, and you can do it right away. And you don't need to waste time or energy, and you just take the look within 1 or 2 seconds at the button, at the blinds, and then you know how to or what ranges to open raise. Right, guys, that's it for the first theory video. And I always recommend take a pause for a couple of days, recap what you have learned here, because in the practical video we're gonna do hands, and I also want you to pause within the hands and think about, okay, how can I adjust what I would do, and so you can apply the theories right away. And this is how you can get the most value out of it. All right, guys, that's it for here. That was RYEbenCB for Raise Your Edge. See you in the next video. Bye bye.